looking after nature, it's a sign of patriotism. You know, if you like your country, you like your land, you need to look after it. You don't do that in your own home. And if your country is your home, then you shouldn't be throwing your rubbish around. You should be making sure that things are looked after and protected, not just for us, but for the generations to come.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. I have a very special guest today, a very renowned neurosurgeon, professor, doctor. And that is not the aim of my podcast, because I like to talk about most memorable journeys, but he is also photographer. He loves to take photographs, he loves to cook, and he loves to travel. That's what I want to talk about with Vakis Papanastassiou. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Vakis.
Thank you for inviting me, Lisa. Good morning to you.
I'm very happy that we made it, because I know that you are a very, very busy man. So I really, really appreciate your time. Let's just go ahead and start about maybe your most memorable journeys or some journeys. Did you travel as a child?
Yes, I did. I mean, in those days, it was, I remember vividly my first travels with my parents in 1967, when we had to get the boat to Greece. I remember we took the car with us. In those days, the cruise ships were carrying cargo, so we took our car. My parents and my brother and I went for a road trip around Greece. We went to Athens, Lefkada, Salonika. So that I was 6 at the time, and I still remember, it was a long time ago, as you know, still remember details of the travel, because for me it was such a novelty, and leaving the island for the first time, it was wonderful. And then we repeated that in 5 years later, 71, we went to Italy, again with the same way. Took the car to Piraeus, drove up to Igoumenitsa, got the ferry across, and traveled through Naples, Rome, Florence, Venice, and came down by what was then Yugoslavia.
Wow, that was a very adventurous thing to do at the time, don't you think? I mean, your parents, they loved traveling too then.
Yes, they did. They did. And obviously, I caught the bug at a young age and carried on ever since.
I made sure that my kids caught the bug as well. So it's because traveling opens your horizon. It makes you a person who tolerates people more. Did you always know that you wanted to be a doctor?
Well, not always, but certainly by my teens, I guess. My father was a general surgeon, so I was exposed to it, I guess, from a relatively young age. But neither of my other 2 siblings have gone into it. So it's just, I'm sure it influences you, but it's not what determines whether you do it or not. For me, it seemed to fit what both my strengths and my desires were. So I haven't regretted it.
Okay. So you studied in the UK, didn't you?
That's right. I studied in Manchester, and then my specialty in Oxford, and then worked in Glasgow. So 25 years I was there. 25
years in the UK?
Yes.
So you do know your way around there, and you do know how things work.
Oh, yes.
Where did you travel as a young man? Did you travel on your own?
I mean, after that, of course, after my initial trips, then I only did one more trip, and then we couldn't leave Cyprus because until we finished our army service. But then went to the UK in 1980. And I remember, again, first time back, a group of us, 6 of us, traveled back to Cyprus by train and boat.
Oh, so wow.
We got a railway ticket from London to Athens. And in those days, you had this interrail tickets where you could stop at 5 or 6 stops along the way. And so we stopped in Paris and Geneva, Florence, Rome, and then got the boat from Piraeus to Limassol on deck. And it was very cheap to travel. Again, in those days, air tickets were very, very expensive. So it was an easy way to spend a week or 2 coming back. So we had great fun and a lot of stories.
Well, it was also a beautiful experience. I mean, apart from being cheaper.
Oh, sure. And I've encouraged my children to do the same. Even it's easier in some respects to travel, but it's also probably a little bit more dangerous and needs a little bit more care than it did in those days.
Yeah, but you have to take a few little risks in life, don't
course.
you? When did you travel far for the first time? I'm talking about further than the UK or further than Greece.
Further than Europe. Well,
further than Europe, yes.
Well, I went to the States in 91 and had a great time there. I went for a conference in Monterey, in California. I landed in Los Angeles and I rented a car.
Okay, that's
and I remember in LAX, and I had rented a little metro. And the guy says, well, where are you going? I said, well, I'm driving up to San Francisco. And he says, oh, no, you cannot possibly have this car. So he says, look, I'll upgrade you at no cost. So then the upgrade wasn't available. To cut a long story short, I ended up with a brand new white sports Cadillac, 5-liter engine. And at the time, I was a research registrar in the UK, so didn't really have the salary for that. But I showed up at this brain tumor conference in Monterey driving this car. My American colleagues still remember it whenever we meet. They say, geez, remember when you showed up and we couldn't figure out, who was this guy with
this rich kid?
But it was great because after the conference, I then did a solo road trip, and I drove from Monterey up to Yosemite and then back down through the Death Valley to Las Vegas, then San Diego, and then back to Los Angeles. So it was driving. America is made for driving. I mean, it was really a great experience. And I've met people, just stopping in little places, meeting the locals and, really trying to get to know people away from the busy touristy areas. So it was great. So yes, that was my first sort of transatlantic trip. And then in 96, I went to Australia where I worked for 6 months. I went to Melbourne. So I worked there for 6 months and got a chance to travel around Australia a bit. So yeah, those were my first two long trips.
Did you like Australia? Did you like working in Australia?
Oh, yeah. It was. I nearly stayed. I had an offer to take a permanent post in Melbourne. But, we had already decided to get married, so I had to get back to the UK. And
Thank God you did.
So, yeah, but it was good. It was good. And I've been back since. And again, made great friends that we're still in contact after, 25 years. It was a great time. It was really, really great lifestyle there. Open spaces, beautiful cities, nature is unbelievable.
I love Australia. It's just so far away. I also love the west of the United States. I traveled all the places that you were mentioning. I used to be a tour guide there, and it definitely is one of, especially the Monument Valley and all this nature is one of my favorite places in the world. But then again, Australia is also really, really beautiful. There are so many beautiful places in the world, and I know that you appreciate beautiful places because I know you. We also hiked together on my birthday not long ago. So you're a nature lover. When I was checking you out a little bit, I also found that you published a lot of papers, a lot of scientific papers, but you published a book called The Birds of Evretou Dam.
That's right. Yes. It combines my passion for photography and nature, really. And it was a pet project. It was something that that area of Cyprus for me is wonderful, and I try and get there at least every fortnight, if not more often. And I usually would wander around the dam, and the wildlife is unbelievable. Unfortunately, we do not appreciate it, and we do not protect it enough, I think. And that was my sort of effort, if you like, to raise awareness. And I got that book printed, and I sent a copy to all the high schools in Cyprus.
Oh, good.
To try and encourage both teachers and the students to actually appreciate. I mean, I had emails from lots of people. I had people from abroad who visited Cyprus and said they didn't realize we had that many birds in Cyprus. Or, certainly the work of the Bird Society is be commended. But we need more protection for habitats like that. Okay, it's an artificial habitat. It's a dam reservoir, but that doesn't matter. It has created a lake. The first one that a lot of migrating birds coming in from the west will come upon, and they will settle. They will stop. And, in that book, I have nearly 100 different species of birds that I just encountered just walking around the lake over the course of a year and a half. And
lots of those birds are, I think it's called endemic. They only exist in Cyprus. Or am I wrong?
There's a couple that are endemic. There are some that are just passers, and you are lucky to catch them. They may come for only a week or two as they stop on their way from their migration territory to the new, and they stop for refueling. So then you only get them, like bee-eaters, for example. You'll only get them for a week or two in March and September when they come and go. We have a few that are endemic. They're only in Cyprus, Cyprus wheatear, for example. But then there are others that they come either for the summer or for the winter. And it's interesting. I'll tell you a little anecdote. It was one March, and I was walking around. It was the time when the changeover, if you like, is. And in the winter in Evretou, there are cormorants. It used to be one, and then he brought a pair, and now there's 7 or 8 of them. So it was early March, and I went, and the cormorant was there swimming around, and then 4 or 5 other cormorants flew over. So he took off and joined them, and off they went. And an hour later, the grey herons appeared. They come for the summer. It was like a hotel. I've left, and then the next lot come in. And it was, I was able to have this sequence of photographs of the cormorants in the morning taking off, leaving the lake, and then the herons appearing for the summer season. So it was good. It was good fun.
That's amazing. And, listening to you talking about this, I feel that this is your way of relaxing. Do you relax in nature? Because you've got a tough job to do during the week.
It is. It's different. I mean, yes, it is relaxing. And I go from being inside a room, let's say from operating in open space, I go from having to concentrate in one very small detail to being able to take everything in. So it really is very different from what I do, and that relaxes me. It's
So you would recommend people to spend more time in nature and appreciate it?
Absolutely. I think that it puts us into perspective, and it doesn't have to be far and exotic, even though the far and exotic have a lot to commend them. And probably one of my most memorable journeys is that. But, nature is around us all the time. We just need to be able to open our eyes and see it. And, in Cyprus, we're blessed. We've got mountains, we've got sea, so we should be first taking more interest, but also looking after it a bit better. Mm-hmm. I think that is...
I totally agree.
The problem is for me, and I have some conversations with people sometimes, looking after nature, it's the sign of patriotism. If you like your country, you like your land, you need to look after it. You don't do that in your own home. And if your country is your home, then you shouldn't be throwing your rubbish around. You should be making sure that things are looked after and protected, not just for us, but for the generations to come.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And we do live on a beautiful island. I call it my island in the sun because especially in the winter, the beautiful light that we have, I don't think that the sky is as blue as it is here in many places. So, you don't need to go far, as you say, just appreciate what is around you. But I'd like to talk about going far a little more now, because I know that you have been to the North Pole and to the South Pole. And I think it was in the same year. Is that correct?
Well, went past the Arctic Circle, didn't make it to the North Pole, but yes, went to the Arctic and the Antarctic. We went to the Arctic in May. We took a boat that just does the run from the north of Norway down to, so we went from Trondheim. So it crosses the Arctic Circle. You start north of the Arctic Circle and you come down south. That was in May. And then in December, we went to Antarctica. We almost made it to the Antarctic Circle, but the pack ice was there. So we got down to, I think, 65 degrees south. But that was as far as he would go. Obviously, the Arctic and the Antarctic are so different. And, the Arctic is a frozen sea surrounded by land. The Antarctic is a frozen land surrounded by sea. So it's the exact opposite. But it was unbelievable. That's, for me, was probably the most memorable journey. It was nature at its most pristine and most wild. And you really, felt privileged. There's not many people are able to do that and be there and get there. And you see ice that human foot has not touched. The wildlife does not fear. When you do get the chance to get there, the penguins will come and step on you. You're not allowed to get near them. You should try and avoid. But if they come, you have to stay there and allow them to go past. And they do not understand. Their only predators are the seals in the ocean. So these hulking, bulking sort of mammals on land, for them, they're a weird novelty, but they do hold no fear for them. So the landscape is unbelievable. The icebergs are amazing. And even though the wildlife in variety appears limited, it's huge. You find, a penguin colony with tens of thousands of them. You see blue whales, in their tents and seals. So it was a truly wonderful experience.
And I imagine that you took a lot of photographs.
3,500. It's a luxury of modern day. I remember contrast, because with digital cameras now you could do that.
Imagine if you had to print them all.
Yes, but then the trouble is afterwards having to trim them down. But I remember the difference. I went in 92. I went to Tanzania and climbed Kilimanjaro and went for a safari.
Oh, did you?
I had, yes. And in those days, used film and slides. I still have boxes of slides stacked up in the attic somewhere. But, you would take a picture, you didn't know if it would come out until you went and developed it, a month later, there was no, and then it would cost because, you could use so many film. And if you wanted if you had different light conditions, you have to have a different film for each situation. So, you had to have different cameras loaded and nowadays you have one camera, you just change the ISO, you change the settings. You don't have to worry about the only thing why I still carry two cameras is to have two different lenses, so I don't have to change the lens from a wide angle to a macro or to a telephoto lens. So, but it was a completely different photographic experience, if you like, but far more work afterwards.
We have come a long way. I want to hear a little bit more about that Kilimanjaro trip. We've come a long way when it comes to photography, but we have also come a long way when it comes to medicine, haven't we? When you think of what happened in the last 30, 40 years.
Well, we have. It's when you're part of something, you do not understand and you don't appreciate the differences. Only when you step back and you see, what's been happening. I remember as a young trainee doctor back in 85, 86, the first MRI in the UK was for neurological diseases was put in Manchester, where I was a houseman. And at the time we were doing sampling patients that used to get contrast to see if it was safe. Nowadays, we're now looking at MRIs with a much stronger magnet that can actually look certainly for research purposes, and they're coming into clinical practice, you can look at cellular detail. So you can have an MRI scan that looks a bit like what the pathologist looks under the microscope. So, with the 7 and 9 Tesla magnets that are coming through now, you're able to essentially dissect somebody without touching them.
Wow.
So
sounds a little scary.
That's in the space of one person's working life, if you like. And well, I haven't quite finished yet, but that was from my early days, and you don't appreciate it. And it's when you look back and you think, oh God, we didn't have that. We're not able to do that. The computers are becoming so more powerful. If we wanted to do a reconstruction, for example, let's say you take horizontal cuts and you want to make them vertical. In those days, you used to put it on the computer and let it run overnight. You would have it in the morning. Now on my laptop, I click an icon and it just reformats it in a few milliseconds. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes, and I think there's good and bad to everything that happens, isn't there? I mean, this obviously is good for mankind, but then some developments are, of course, also a little scary, how fast we are going and where are we going with certain stuff.
I don't think that developments are good or bad. Developments are there. Good or bad is what we do with them.
Make them.
And I think that is really what, it's up to us to use them in a constructive and innovative and a beneficial way to humanity. Mm-hmm. Nanotechnology, well, we can use it for medicine or we can use it for weapons. Mm-hmm. It's up to us. So the development in itself has no ethical issues. The ethical issues is how are we using it? And, there's an example now, for example, with the using animal, the pig's heart that was transplanted to a human. So the technology is there. Now, I'm not saying whether we should be for or against, but the argument should be of how we're using that technology and then the ability to change that. It's not playing God, using what is there and making sure that we use it for good.
Yeah, that is very, very true what you're saying. And I want to ask you, because you've traveled a lot and you've seen many, many different people, do you believe that people are basically good?
Yes, of course.
You do. You want to, because I want to believe that. I want to believe that people are basically good.
People, and it's interesting that the more, so it doesn't sound patronizing, but let's say primitive in terms of technological development a society is, the more humane it is. Even though the people who should be looking after what they got more because it's limited and it's only there, they're the ones most likely to share it with you. You will find more compassion and inclusivity in the tribal mountains of Vietnam that you'd find in the European city. And that's true. So I look at, for example, let's say our attitude now to refugees and migrants and so on. And, and I look at the Greek tradition. And by Greek, I mean going back to the classics. I mean, it's okay. We always proud of our ancestors, but then we need to understand what we're proud for. The foreigner, the xenos, was under the auspices of the father of the gods, Zeus. He, the Xenios Dies, he was protecting the foreigner when he came to you. And you would share, you would give him shelter, share your food, and you would not even ask them what they wanted or what they were doing unless they wanted to volunteer that information. Your duty was just to give them shelter and food and see them on their way. And we were very inclusive. We were borrowing from other cultures. We were assimilating other cultures. Now we seem to be forced one way or another to just look inwards all the time. I know there are all sorts of issues with modern movement of people, but the closing your doors and raising walls is not the answer. And we were, the Greeks and Cypriots, we have been, forced to go all over the world. I remember when I went to Melbourne, and we had operated on somebody from the Cyprus community there, and people found out. And of course, a lot of them in Melbourne were from my father's village because it's occupied. So they heard the surname and they said, right, okay, it must be, from our village. So they came, they found me, they invited me to a party, and there was this lady that she said, well, what do you want me to make you? And I asked for her to make some tsipopita, which is a pie they make with buttermilk.
Wow.
So when they have the milk, they take the froth off the top. She had learned how to do it from my late grandmother. And half a world across, I came across her, and she says, right, your grandma taught me how to do this, and I will make it for you when you come for dinner.
Oh my God, this is amazing. And this is so, so very true, because I have traveled a lot all over the world, and I have learned that we are all the same. We all have the same needs. We all have the same pains, and we all want to be happy and safe.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah, that was beautiful what you just said. And especially in today's world where we are all just looking after not all of us, but many people just looking after themselves. Just a quick want to go back to Kilimanjaro. How was that?
Well, I had just finished my research, and I started working in Oxford at the time. So I hadn't been on holiday for a bit, so I took nearly a month off, 3 weeks, and combined a 1 week safari with the 1 week climb up the Kilimanjaro. So we went first from Arusha to travel around in a converted army truck with a company I was traveling with, camping around in the bush. Ngorongoro crater, it's an unbelievable place. It's one of my favorite places in the world. The concentration of wildlife is unbelievable. And it's an interesting theme, going off on a tangent here, of calderas, really, and how different they can be, but always stunning and wonderful. And you think of the caldera in Santorini, the Ngorongoro crater, you think of the calderas in Hokkaido, which are lakes and with warm springs around them. It's just an unbelievable place. So after finishing safari, a group of 4 of us with our guides walked up, and it's interesting. And then there's 4 of us, and we started with 12. I mean, what you realize is you walk for hours to cover a few kilometers. I mean, the oxygen is very low. You cannot run. You need to walk very, very slowly. Otherwise, you hyperventilate and you end up with mountain sickness. So you walk up, and at every stop, they have to carry everything. Water, there's no water up there. In those days, it was firewood. So they had to carry the wood for the fire. Mm. And then at every hut, 3 of the porters would be going back. So they would be the ones that they would only go to the first hut, the ones for the second, and then you ended up with the guide and 2 porters for the final bit to walk up there. So it took about 5 days to walk up and 3 days to walk back down again. And even the porters, because they don't stay up long enough, they don't acclimatize. So even the people there can get mountain sickness, even though they live and they go up and down the mountain all the time, but they're never up long enough to acclimatize.
An amazing experience, and once more nature dictating, isn't it? I mean, we have to adjust. And this
it's when you go to a little bit remote places that you realize that you are on one part of nature, but you are helpless. We think we're all powerful, raw technology and so on. And it's the same. I mean, I another little anecdote. When one of our travels, I took the whole family. We went to the Orinoco Delta in Venezuela. We were visiting some friends, had some very good friends in Caracas. So they organized for us to have 5-6 days in the Orinoco Delta. So that was an hour by plane from Caracas to Maturan, an hour by car from Maturan to the river, and an hour on a speedboat on the river to get to the delta. When we got there, I thought, oh dear, if something happens, then we have to do this in reverse to get to what we call civilization. But it was very funny because at one point we were in this hotel, which was an eco lodge on the river. And across, they were sponsoring a school for the local Indians. And there was this boy that was obviously unwell. So they brought him over to the lodge. And of course, he spoke only the local language. He didn't speak Spanish. So there was a guy that was translating what he said to Spanish. I didn't have any Spanish. There was another guy that spoke Spanish and English to translate to me because I was the only doctor around. And this boy was obviously not well and and I thought, there's nothing I can do. I have no tools. I have no kit. I have no, I cannot do blood tests. I cannot do x-rays. All we can do is, he had a very sore tummy, which was inflated. And then all we could do is wait for his mother to come and pick him up. But these people, we had a wonderful guide, Raphael, going through. He knew every tree in the jungle. He knew there was a tree that the leaves would foam. So they use it for soap.
Wow.
There was another one, you cut it, had this red juice, which helped clotting. It looked like blood. Mm-hmm. It actually declotted like blood. So when they had a wound, they would put that on and it would stop the bleeding. And I remember really we would walk around and then there was this downpour. He was collecting bits and bobs from the jungle floor. And then when we stopped, he lit fire with no matches, nothing, with a stick. And he, you see it in, movies and National Geographic sort of documents. But here he did that, mixed up some water with flour, and he produced bread in the middle of this wet jungle that had just had a downpour. And you thought there's no way that anything would be able to set on fire here. But it was unbelievable.
That's very humbling, isn't it?
It is.
We forget to connect with nature. I mean, we've been saying it a few times in this podcast, and it can heal. We can heal through nature in many different ways. So before I let you go, Vakis, I know that you're a busy man, but I want to touch one last subject, and that is food, because I know that you like to eat and you like to cook. What is your favorite food and what do you like to cook most?
Oh, dear. I don't have I don't have a favorite food. I like food. I like taste. I like to explore different combinations. And for me, it's the numerous possibilities of what you can have. I guess one of the sort of most comforting, foods for me would be a risotto.
Yes, I agree.
But with plenty of cheese in it and truffle and so on. But, you can, something that can appear very, very simple, but it's got a lot of memories, I guess. And that's it. I mean, we and it's interesting that even neurologically, our taste circuits and our memory circuits are the same. And that's why we smells and tastes will evoke memories. They live adjacent brain circuits. So food for me is not just nourishment, it's an experience. And I try and improvise, I try and mix things up. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's being able to try and make something interesting even with the most, what would appear to be banal ingredients.
Wonderful. When it comes to the future, what would be some travel plans, Vakis, that you have?
Well, I still have sort of three big destinations that I haven't managed. One would be Alaska or North Canada. And the other two are China and India, which are places where I haven't been. And I definitely... So I think this year, if we manage, I think we'll probably be looking at North America, Alaska.
Beautiful. It's one of the places that I haven't been. I was a tour guide in the US everywhere except Alaska. And I think that's definitely worth a visit. And I really, really hope that we can start traveling again, without having to worry about PCR tests and about quarantine. So let's hope for the best. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for having me on your podcast, and all the best for the rest.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes. If you like what you hear and you want to know more about what I do, check out my website, www.thesoulkit.com.